All right, so we're diving into this paper about freedom of expression, right? And especially online these days, it really makes you wonder, is freedom really free when it's algorithms deciding what we even see online?
Well, that's such a good question. And this paper, it argues that this idea of freedom, it's being used as a kind of weapon, especially by some on the right side of the political spectrum.
Yeah, and it's something I've noticed too, with all the different politicians campaigning on these platforms of freedom. But then they're supporting policies that seem to, like, totally go against that whole idea.
Exactly. And that's what's so interesting. The paper suggests that this whole tactic, it's all connected to these like bigger shifts in power, like how globalization and corporations are wielding their influence.
Okay, I'm following you.
Like, think about groups like the Trilateral Commission or the Mont Pelerin Society. They're all about free markets and less government intervention.
Right.
But their critics would argue that what they're really doing is trying to replace those traditional power structures with ones that benefit corporate interests above all else.
So it's like this whole new kind of power dynamic is emerging, and it's using freedom as this like rallying cry, but underneath it's got a totally different agenda.
You got it. And this is where things get really interesting, and by interesting I mean complicated, when we start talking about the digital world. Remember when the internet first became like this big thing?
Yeah.
Everyone thought it was going to be this great equalizer, everyone has a voice kind of thing.
Totally, like this digital public square for anyone to speak their mind.
Exactly. That's what
Exactly.
we all thought. But this paper argues that, well, those in power have figured out how to, manipulate the digital world to their advantage. So instead of this level playing field we were all hoping for, we have algorithms controlling what we see and all these online tactics designed to basically silence anyone who disagrees.
Okay, now I have to know more about these tactics. What are we talking about here?
Okay, so, well, imagine trying to have a conversation, a rational one, in the middle of, like, a huge digital shouting match.
Oh my gosh, yes.
That's kind of what it's like online sometimes. And this paper looks at how certain groups, the authors call them the New Authoritarian and Neo-Fascist International, are using stuff like coordinated online attacks, hate speech, even just the sheer volume of information to drown out anyone with a different viewpoint.
So instead of traditional censorship, it's about like controlling the information and messing with people's perceptions.
Exactly. And it's crazy effective because it plays on our natural human tendency
Yeah.
to believe information that already confirms what we believe.
Oh, absolutely. If you're only seeing stuff that reinforces what you already think, it's easy to get stuck in that echo chamber.
Exactly. And the paper uses the Proyecto Pregón as a case study to show this in action. Have you heard of it?
Yeah, it's that research project happening in Argentina and Colombia, right? I'd love to hear more about how they're studying this.
Oh, it's really fascinating. They're analyzing how politicians, journalists, influencers, anyone with an online platform really, are behaving online, specifically on sites like X, which was Twitter and Instagram. And they're looking for patterns of hate speech, those coordinated attacks we talked about, threats, basically anything used to silence opposing voices.
So they're really getting into the weeds of how these online attacks actually play out. Do they give any specific examples?
They do. They even talk about how some politicians are using the volume of their posts as a tactic. Like, did you know that Javier Milei, he's an Argentinian politician, posts over 300 times a day on X?
300 times a day. Whoa, I can see how that would be so overwhelming that it's difficult to even process anything else anyone else is saying. It's like they're trying to win the argument by exhausting everyone else.
Exactly. And it can create this chilling effect where people are afraid to speak up or disagree for fear of being attacked or harassed.
So it's a new form of censorship then, not through like outright bans or restrictions, but by being intimidating and creating a hostile environment online.
You got it. And it's often disguised as simply exercising one's right to free speech. But the irony is that it ends up silencing more voices than it amplifies.
It sounds like a vicious cycle, honestly. How do we even begin to address something like this? It feels kind of impossible. It really does. Where do you even start with something this complex?
Well, the paper says that just being aware of it is a huge first step.
Yeah.
Like, if we can learn to recognize when these tactics are being used, we're less likely to be, swayed by them.
That makes sense. But is simply knowing about it enough?
It's a good place to start. But we also need to be way more critical of the information we see online. Like, don't just accept things at face value.
Right.
Check the source, look for actual evidence, and try to see different perspectives on the issue.
It's like that saying, don't believe everything you read on the internet.
Exactly. And these days, it's not even just about what you read. It's what you see, what you hear, what those algorithms are feeding you constantly. We need to be like really savvy media consumers.
And so much of it feels like it's designed to make us react emotionally without thinking.
Absolutely. You're exactly right. This paper talks about how these online tactics are often intentionally trying to be provocative, you know?
Yeah.
They want to get an emotional response to basically bypass our rational minds, and that makes us way more vulnerable to being manipulated.
You know, when I think about the times I've gotten sucked into those kinds of arguments online, it's always when I'm like feeling really worked up about something.
And that's exactly what these tactics are trying to do. The paper even makes a connection between this kind of online manipulation and this idea of manufactured consent. Have you ever heard of that?
I feel like I have, but I'd love to hear more about it.
So it's an idea that's been around for a while, but it's super relevant in the digital age. Basically, it's how propaganda and media can really shape public opinion and influence how people think and act, often without them even realizing it.
So it's less about outright censorship and more about like subtly influencing what people think and believe.
Precisely. And it's really sneaky because it can be hard to even recognize when it's happening. Think about how advertising works. It doesn't force you to buy something. It makes you want to buy it. It makes you associate that product with these positive emotions.
Yeah, I never thought about it like that, but that's so true.
And those same principles, they can be used for political ideas, social movements, anything, really. If you can control how people see something, you can control their behavior without them even knowing they're being manipulated.
That's kind of scary when you think about it.
It is.
Uh.
But this paper suggests that, even just knowing about these tactics is the first step to fighting back.
So knowledge is power.
Exactly. The more we understand about how this manipulation works, the better we are at resisting it, and the better we are at demanding better from our information sources, our leaders, each other.
It's like we need to find a way to have better, more honest conversations online, even when we disagree.
I completely agree. And that is not an easy thing to do. It means we all have to be more aware of our own biases, be willing to listen to different points of view, and just, engage with respect, even when it's hard.
It's about rebuilding that trust, both in our information sources and in each other.
Exactly. Because trust is crucial for any functioning democracy. And right now, it feels like trust is under attack from every direction.
This paper definitely doesn't hold back.
It doesn't. But it also offers a bit of hope. The authors argue that by making people aware of this, by understanding how these tactics work, we can start to take back control and create a better, fairer internet.
So we've talked about all these challenges, right? These tactics being used to silence people online and just like the overall decline of trust. Is there any hope here? What can we actually do to push back against this?
Well, it's not going to be one thing, that's for sure. It's more like a multi-pronged approach, if you will.
Yeah, okay, I like that.
On a personal level, it starts with, awareness, which we already talked about. But it's got to go beyond just knowing. It's got to be action, too.
Yeah.
Think about the stuff you're sharing online. Is it from a source you actually trust?
Right, right.
Are you contributing to all the noise, or are you actually trying to have real discussions?
It's about being more, picky about what you share and what you listen to, right? Not just hitting retweet without even thinking about what you're putting back out there.
That's it. And don't be afraid to, step outside that echo chamber,
Yeah.
Actively seek out different views, especially the ones that make you kind of uncomfortable.
Yeah, because it might feel nice to be surrounded by people who already agree with you, but it doesn't really help you grow. What about on a larger scale? What can be done beyond just, individual actions?
Well, this is where things get really interesting, honestly.
Yeah.
This paper argues that we need to completely rethink how social media platforms are built from the ground up.
Oh, wow.
Like right now.
Yeah.
They're designed to keep us scrolling, to keep us engaged, even if that means showing us the most sensational, outrageous stuff instead of what's actually important.
Because outrage equals clicks, and clicks equal profits. It's hard to change that.
It really is. But some experts are suggesting that we tweak the algorithms. What if we prioritize credible sources and genuine discussions instead of just whatever's going to go viral?
Right, right.
Imagine if these platforms actively encouraged, respectful debate and actual fact-checking.
That would be amazing. Is anyone actually trying to do that?
Yeah, some platforms are starting to play around with those ideas, but it's super early. Others are being pressured to be more transparent about their algorithms and how they handle misinformation in the first place.
It's such a tricky thing. You have to balance free speech with protecting people from harmful content.
For sure. It's a tough line to walk.
Well, this has been, I'm not even kidding, really eye-opening. I'm definitely feeling a bit worried, but also, honestly, empowered. Like you said, knowledge is power.
I agree. This paper really highlights how the future of online discussion, maybe even democracy itself, depends on us becoming more aware and critical. It's about seeing the manipulation, having those good faith conversations, and just demanding better from ourselves and the platforms we use.
It's a call to action for all of us, really. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with this thought. What role are you going to play in building a better online world? One that's more informed, more equitable. It's something to really think about. Until next time, keep learning, keep being curious, and let's keep this conversation going.